Hello, my name is Ortiz and I'm in year 11. When you're in year 11, on top of exams, classes, and studies, you have one thing that no other year has to do. It's called the Personal Project. It sounds a lot like its meaning. It's basically a project that you keep close to heart, and it's really personal. One of my friends is building a PC from scratch, and another is making a video about miming. Personally, I've always been interested in film and music, so I decided to base my personal project on my interests. We're meant to have a guiding question, something to help us remember what we're researching for. My guiding question is, how does music affect the way we perceive visual imagery? And by that I mean, how can or does make us think about what's happening? For example, if you're sitting in a theater watching a movie, and then suddenly a fight scene comes on, would having tense music make the scene you're watching more powerful? Would it make it less powerful? That's what I'm gonna find out. How and why? To answer these questions along with my guiding question, I decided to do one thing. I decided to make a short film of my own, complete with its own soundtrack. To do this, I needed to do research on two key topics: how the scene is portrayed in a film, and the effects of music on the brain. Let's start off with the first topic, how the scene is portrayed. First of all, what would a film be without something to look at? It'd just be a blank space, maybe some music, but it wouldn't be that interesting. The way a director pictures his cuts is crucial to how the audience interacts and understands what he's trying to show. Let's take a quick look at some famous movie clips, and I'll make sure that we analyze them well enough. I'll type that out on the screen.
Gusteau was right. Oh, yeah. Oh, amazing. Each flavor was totally unique.
Why so serious? He comes at me with the knife. Why so serious? He sticks the blade in my mouth. Let's put a smile on that face. And... why so serious?
My cowboy!
Woody? What's he doing in there?
You're the snake in my boot.
What?
There's a snake in my boot!
I can summarize what we learned from the short clips we just saw in 3 points. You have to keep the motion of the film relatively similar, like you follow them with the camera. I have to make it clear what I'm trying to show, have a subject in focus, and then I can bring the first idea in mind and follow that subject while he's in focus. And third, like you saw in Toy Story 3, the music really hit me in the heart. A compelling soundtrack will make any film really, amazing. I will go into further detail about my short film in a moment, but first let's talk about equipment. The equipment I used was fairly standard. It consisted of a tripod, which I'm using now, a camera, which I'm also using now, it's HC V100 Panasonic to be exact, and an SD card for filming. Without this, the camera would be nothing. For music production, even if I'm terrible at it, I decided to use FL Studio. I already own the software, so it's a box off my checklist. Not to mention it'll give me some experience in case I do want to use it when I get older. That was most of the equipment I used, if not all of it. Now finally, before we get into the actual film that I made, which is relatively short, let's talk about the science behind this. Specifically the brain, the ears, and the eyes. When thinking about how music affects our visual intake, two topics come to mind. The link between our eyes and ears, and how music actually affects our brain. Let's take the first topic. To be put simply, your eyes and ears are very similar in the way they work to your nose and your mouth. You know when you try to eat food when you're blocking your nose, you can't really taste it? Yeah, it's relatively the same with the eyes and the ears. For example, when you're watching a quiet movie scene, it's like trying to eat food with a blocked nose. You can't really get a feel for it unless you're paying super attention or it's meant to be quiet. But when music comes into the scene, you're able to taste the food to its fullest. This is because music, no matter what it is, whether it's happy music, sad music, or whether it's metal or dubstep, fills in the gaps that your eyes cannot pick up. It lets you in on things like mood, emotion, the rhythm of the scene, the flow of the scene, that kind of stuff. Like I mentioned earlier, sometimes directors and producers particularly make a scene quiet. This is so that the audience has to focus on it, and to make it tense or dramatic. For example, if I cut the music in this video, and I just talk to you, I think it becomes a lot more serious than it was. You could say they do this to leave the audience in the dark, not knowing what's going to happen next. For example, something might jump out of nowhere. And now on to the second subject, how music directly affects the brain. If you didn't already know, the brain has several parts to it, and also several colors. Well, not really several, it can be classified into two colors, the white matter and the gray matter. The gray matter is probably the most common term you hear. It's where your thinking is done and where your connections are made, when I'm talking about the spinal cords and stuff. And the white matter does everything else. The white matter specifically is the part of your brain that deals with emotions. This particular organ is called the limbic system. It takes the electrical signals that your ears pick up and then sorts and archives them into neat columns according to if they have recurring patterns or similar patterns. Speaking about patterns, this is a good place to end our discussion on the brain and music. The term pattern brings me to my next topic, music. And I don't mean like music in general, I mean the three specific emotions that I decided to cover. These emotions are happiness, sadness, and tenseness. Each of these emotions have their own special characteristics. For example, happy music. Happy music is played on the major scale. It's generally bright, cheerful, and uplifting, all of these happy connotations. To make happy music, technically all you have to do is place notes on a major scale. This is what the major scale sounds like. It has a precise start and finish, and it has 8 notes in it, which is why it's called an octave, because octo means 8. It also sounds pretty happy in general. Now for the next emotion, sadness or unhappiness. As you can guess from the name, this emotion is the exact opposite of happiness. When I say sad music, generally the thoughts that come to your mind are things like dread and depression and anxiety and all of these negative connotations. There are even some specific genres that come with sad music, things like emo and heartbreak songs. While happy music resides in the major scale, sadness resides in the minor scale. This is what the minor scale sounds like. As you just heard, it sounds incomplete and it sounds heavy. The change of 3 simple notes from white to black, well, from whole step to half step, make it really uneasy and depressing. Sad music is pretty depressing in general, which comes from the name, sad music, I guess. Now for the final emotion I plan to cover, tense. Tense isn't really an emotion of music per se. It's something you feel from the presence or the absence of music. It's most commonly felt in thriller and horror movies such as Jaw, Saw, Shutter Island, and Argo. Argo is an amazing example. This is because the movie was so tense. At times it got so quiet that, you know the silent ringing that you hear in your ears constantly? Yeah, that was louder than the actual movie. It was incredible. Anyway, tense music, unlike both happy and sad, does not have a specific scale to it. It's mostly repetition of keys and sounds. The ringing I talked about earlier is a good example. Right after silence, I think is the most common sound you hear in tense movies. You really know when things are tense when you tend to hold your breath, or when your blood rate drops, or your hands go cold, or your back goes cold, or you break into a cold sweat. Emotions that come with tense are usually uneasiness and nervousness and anxiety. Kinda similar to sad music, but not exactly. Actually quite far from it. With all of the emotions done, let's jump right into my short film. Note, it is only about 20 seconds long, and like I said, I'm not an expert in making music. I will play the scenes in order of the emotions that I talked about. Happy, sad, and then tense last. From the short film that I created, you might have gotten the feelings I was talking about, and you might not have. This could be a fault on my part because of my either bad cameramanism or my lack of musical ability. But what I was trying to show was that music does affect the way you perceive visual imagery. Like I talked about, music is kind of the background information that tells you about the flow and the rhythm of things. The absence of music can create tense music, playing on the major scale can create happy music, and playing on the minor scale can create sad music. With all of these ideas put together, a film man can really produce this image that's so vivid in the audience's mind. Like I said just before, it fills in the gaps that your eyes cannot see, and gives you this extra information that helps you comprehend what's happening behind what you can see. I hope you enjoyed this short video. Hopefully it was under 7 minutes long. This was my personal project, June Ortiz, signing out. That was so corny. Ow, my heart hurts. This is my personal project by Gene Ortiz.